Hello and welcome, and we'll go ahead and get started today. Hello, I am Raylan Sakamusaraka. I'm an assistant teaching professor at the Human-Computer Interaction Institute at the School of Computer Science here at Carnegie Mellon. More importantly and relevant for today is I'm one of the leaders in ENAiBLE, a retail and services collaborative, which is a joint venture of CMU School of Computer Science and the Tepper School of Business. Today's session that you're joining is our conversation titled Recruiting and Retaining Product Managers by Building a Product-Led Culture. And ENAiBLE has brought this to you. This unique forum is aimed at the retail and services industry, designed to really meet the specific needs of retail and service customers through advances in both design and technology. There's more information on our website at cmu.edu/ENAiBLE, ENAiBLE. And before we get started, I do want to shout out to our sponsors who have been incredibly helpful this past semester and year, which are Progressive and Zendesk. So thank you for sponsoring ENAiBLE. Before we jump into the conversation, I also want to go over a few logistics. This event is recorded and it's being recorded currently. So we'll have it, it'll be posted on the website following the event. And this event will be better if you ask questions. So there will be time dedicated to Q&A after we have a discussion with our panelists here. And you'll be able to ask questions by using the Q&A function in Zoom via the button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So while we can't do chat, we can do Q&A, and I am watching that function. And we'll be opening, after our conversation, we'll open up for Q&A after the talk. So thank you. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started on today's topic or today's discussion. This topic is one that kind of came out of several of our conversations with different retail and service companies, including Progressive and Zendesk, as we have conversations with our sponsors. And we've often heard over and over again the challenges these companies have with recruiting and retaining product managers and product management talent, especially in comparison to sort of being recruited away to the big tech companies and what the big tech companies offer. And after a discussion with Brad Iben, who's joined us today, the executive director of our Master in Science and Product Management program, we connected with several of our program alumni to ask them why they chose retail and service companies over big tech. And what ensued was such a lively discussion with this group of people today. I wish we had almost recorded that to present to you. Hopefully we'll get back into the same discussion. I'm really excited to bring this discussion to you today and the opinions of our panelists. So with that, I really want to introduce these talented alums and give them a few minutes to talk about their current role, why they chose the company that they are currently working for, and most importantly, why they stay at that company. And with that, we'll go ahead and we'll start with Pranita Ramakrishnan, who is a senior product manager at Angie. And Pranita, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us what is your current role, a little bit about your current company and why you chose it and why you stay there.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. So I'm a senior PM on the memberships team at Angie. And right after I graduated from the MSPM program in the 2019 cohort, actually worked with at the Home Depot on their homedepot.com or their e-commerce side of the business. And so obviously from that time, as you can imagine, I had a lot of exposure to home services as an industry. And primarily because of the way that homedepot.com works, like a lot of our business is to DIY customers. And I saw in the market, there's an opportunity for like do it for me or DIFM customers, which is really what Angie is focused on. And I wanted to increase my exposure to those kinds of customers and the kinds of challenges that they face when they're looking to like remodel their house or get services from pros. So that's kind of where I am at today. I think home services has a really great area to improve and grow in general as like a market. And I think that's like what's generally interesting about like retail and services is there's a lot of growth opportunity in the market.
Thank you, Pranita. Thank you. Next, we're going to go to Daksh Uday Shah, who's a senior product manager at Walmart Global Tech. Daksh, can you introduce yourself?
Sure, Alan. Really nice to meet everyone today. Happy Wednesday to everyone. I work with Walmart e-commerce with their shop customer journey. What that means is that every time you go on any of Walmart's platforms, an iOS app or the browser, and you log into walmart.com, you're going to shop for items from Walmart, but digitally. I work with that team to make that experience super seamless for our customers. The reason I joined Walmart e-commerce was because of the scale that Walmart operates at. That gives me unique opportunities to figure out, how the consumer mind works, how customers shop online, and that's really one of the biggest driving factors for me personally. Right, what makes somebody choose between, a checked shirt versus a striped shirt, things like that. I'm super curious about that, and that's why I joined Walmart. Why I'm sticking around at Walmart is because of the amazing team that's there. The people that I'm surrounded with are super smart, super passionate, super humble, and sticking around makes sense for me at this stage in my career because I'm learning a lot.
Thank you, Dax. Okay, and next we're going to hear from Nihal Gupta, who's a product manager at HighMark Inc., which is a switch over to a services company. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, so I am Nehal, as Raylene introduced me. I work with HighMark, which is the insurance side of HighMark Health, and I'm based out of Pittsburgh, and I'm a product manager at the insurance side of the equation. Why I chose HighMark is an interesting question. For me, I wanted to be in Pittsburgh. I wanted healthcare. I wanted a role that gave me a 0 to 1 building from scratch kind of a role, which wasn't the case with a lot of job descriptions I read. And why I stayed here is just to make that impact. Our product team is not that big, but I do realize the kind of impact I can make to actually make healthcare affordable. And that's the main reason if I continue to stay here.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. And lastly, I want to introduce Brad Iman, who's our Executive Director of the MSPM program here at CMU. Brad, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and the program?
Sure, I'll start with the program. And we have 3 excellent examples of the program's output with us today, which is exciting. Our program is the best way to tie it to the relevance of today's topic is our program was specifically designed to solve a problem. And that problem is the supply and demand imbalance of product management talent that's available. So many people want to find and hire product managers that are skilled already, and there's so few available on the market. Our program specifically exists to build PMs, to provide students with those skills that the employers want. So really this topic, the topic of discussion today is near and dear to my heart. That covers why we exist, but let's talk about who we are and what we are. We are in many ways, in nearly every way, a one-of-a-kind program. We are a joint venture between the Tepper School of Business and the School of Computer Science. First, that makes us unique right off the bat. Secondly, we focus on the pillars of product management skills, the business, of course, the technical aspect, and then the real secret sauce is the design and the leadership, because all 4 of those combine to create the experience that trains our students as they make their way through the program. The other aspect to it is, and this will be relevant today, I'm sure, because I know even though many of these students are working full-time in retail and service, I know as I look across the faces, they also spent their internships in similar roles. And one of them we wrote a success story about and published it last year. The experience of MSPM, the MS in product management, extends far beyond just the classroom. It's hands-on. These students are graduating with experience. They get to know the industry, they get to understand the industry and follow their hearts toward, in this case, the industry that appealed to them most. It's really exciting to have everybody here It's this, like, as you mentioned, Raylan, even the preview discussion, the getting to know each other discussion got lively, and I can't wait to see how the question and answers flow.
Thank you, Brad. So with that, why don't we jump into that and talk about some of the things. We started the discussion as one about recruiting and how companies could better recruit product managers, but it really came down to a discussion about companies being product-led or product-led at the core. So when we asked about these challenges, a lot of the conversation was about how welcoming the environment may be, or how focused or how able the product manager is to do their job. And sort of we kept coming around this word of product led. So I'm going to start off with that question to all of you, and we'll kind of go around in order. But to you, what does it mean to be product led? And how can companies communicate that commitment of being product led to product management candidates? And why don't we go ahead and start with you, Pranita?
Yeah, sure. So I think a company's dedication to how to their end users and to their customers. So again, taking like a Home Depot example in context, is it's not really about selling a hammer. It's really about, you know, hanging up that picture frame in your new house, or, you know, remodeling your kitchen. So thinking about those larger goals that a customer has in mind, and showing that dedication, I think, whether it's like through like marketing efforts, but also like through the recruitment process. I can give a very specific example. When I was actually recruiting for my internship at MSPM, Home Depot, specifically, there was a director actually who ended up being my hiring director, who pulled up his phone, pulled out an app that their team is currently working on, and walked me through a very specific use case of how employees within the store were having a hard time like finding items. And so it was actually just a number that you could text, that an employee could text and find out, like, I say hammer and then text the store number you're at, and it'll send you the aisle and bay information so that you can quickly assist the customer. And I think just being able to, you know, witness a demo or like talk through a really specific customer problem excited me so much and made me feel, you know, wow, this is definitely a company whose like customer problems I feel really committed towards solving. So I think that active conversation is a really important part.
Docs, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. So Pranita said it the best way possible, right? How tech is really enabling us to, like, retailers and services to solve for customer problems. To add on to that, I think there's a shift in mindset that was required of e-commerce companies and services to change, to think of tech and product management as not product enablers, like not service enablers, but as the places where innovation kind of happens, right? So having your website or your mobile app is not just another retail channel. It's not just another way to fulfill the customer's product requirements, right? It's not just about delivery and pickup, but it is also about how do you understand what a customer requires. It's about having a larger catalog. It's about understanding personalization, right? You can reach the individual customer and the individual customer journey with tech. And that is where that product-led kind of thinking comes in, right? So services and retail in the world that, in the macro environment that they operated in up till like before the internet and before the iPhone was perfect for that environment. But now that we have these different interfaces with which customers are interacting, it requires a different way of thinking about how we can solve customers' problems. And it's just a new skill set, but it's a learnable skill set.
Thank you. Neha, do you want to jump in next?
Sure. For me, product-led, when I started my journey in product, it was adding on to what Pranita and Daksh said, it's all of those things. Plus, for me, it's also how a company tells me that they are product led. So for me, when a company says where they are in their transition into product, that's important. If they're just starting, they may be at a certain point, versus if they have been doing that for 10 years, they are well ahead. And then adding on to being customer centric and customer focused, do they really listen and see what the customer wants, or are they just developing things, whether it's products, whether it's physical, anything? Is it just them developing and rolling out a bunch of features, or is it really customer centric? And then it's also, from company side of the equation, it's also how are their teams structured? That's important, because for a company, when I am thinking of whether this company is product led or not, from job descriptions, I do not get much information. I get more information and understanding once I talk to somebody at that company, that how's the company structure, what are the different teams, is there a large product team, are there smaller product teams, is it iterative development, is it a waterfall kind of development? So for me, product led is all those things, and of course customer centric comes the first thing in mind. And I think and when we talk about how can companies communicate this, it's very hard to communicate it in a job description, because everybody can say, you will scale, you'll be scaling from 10 to 100, you'll scale from 1 to 1000 or whatever, or you are a 0 to 1 builder. But that doesn't really tell you whether this company is really product led, because it's a product management role. So you would assume this is a product led company or a product management kind of company that you're getting into. I think it's more of those conversations when either you are in interviews or if you reach out to people, that you can have a conversation with them to actually understand that do they really do customer studies, user studies, meet customers, see them in action. So all of those actual human centric things, if they really do it, then yes, they are product centric. And it also comes to how, whether they even implement it or not. Some people would just study and not do anything about it. So it's a two-way approach in my mind.
Thank you. I think in our conversation, there were some really interesting things that companies might do or say, as you were saying, in an interview or in those early processes of recruiting, that signaled whether they were more product-led, customer-centric versus sort of organizational silo-centric. And one of the words, and you had mentioned it, Neha, but was also being feature-driven. And oftentimes organizations can be feature-driven versus customer-centric. And I just kind of wanted to throw that out there to kind of talk about, a lot of people might say, well, features are the product. How is that not product-led? The key here might be, communicating more that you're customer-centric or user-led. Do you guys want to expand on that a little bit? Because I thought that was a really great part of our conversation earlier.
Sure, maybe I can get us started. The phrase that we use is feature factory. We don't want to be a feature factory as a product-led company, right? There's so many features that we get. Every person has ideas. What is the competition doing? What do I think I would want if I was a customer of this service or this or this retail kind of a channel, right? But the folly with that kind of thinking is that we'll have a feature, let's build it out, let's experiment whether it's going to stick or not, whether users are going to accept that feature or not. But my thinking around this is that as a product-led company, or as a company that's aspiring to be product-led, like take a step back, do that customer walkthrough, right? Talk to your customers, talk to your sales associates, see what are the problems that they're facing, be that fly on the wall, do things that don't scale, right? It's easy to actually go ahead and put a feature on your website or on your app because that's scale, right? You get to reach X million number of customers immediately. But what is the insight that is driving that feature? What is the problem that it is solving? What is the hypothesis that you're trying to test out with this experiment? So I think there is a need for the leadership in these organizations to encourage this kind of hypothesis-based approach rather than becoming a feature factory. I think, and it has to come top down because people at my level, right, we're in a constant struggle for what's my priority. Do I do what the leadership is asking? Do I do what's right for the customer? Do I do what's available? Perhaps I have like an inventory of X number of items in a particular category. Do I need to ensure that we liquidate that? Or we have a particular service sector that is not getting the same kind of visibility on our digital screens. So do I need to build out a feature for that? So we have a lot of conflicting priorities as early career product managers, and we look to leadership to help us prioritize that. And I think that having a leadership that is bought into this product-led culture, we need to know what is the customer problem that we're trying to solve, is super helpful for us.
I will add on to what Daksh said. So when we talk of feature-centric versus really user or customer-centric or customer-focused, as Daksh said, that you could either be a feature factory, just rolling out features, looking at what really will stick, versus really doing ethnographic research or any kind of research. Like for Pranita, it could be going into Home Depot store. I worked at Dick's Sporting Goods for my internship, so I walked into their stores to really see how things happen. So anytime a company says, oh, we'll just roll out features versus we'll really study what's needed, where our customers struggling or what might be helpful, I think that's the clear difference between just becoming a feature-centric versus a user-centric or a customer-focused company in my mind.
Yeah, and all excellent points. And I think just sort of my 2-cent summary on that as well is, I think there is often this myth that those things can't coexist, that they don't live on some sort of spectrum. And I think that's really important. I've found that when product leadership and business leadership really work together to fight that myth. So saying this drives, both product metrics in terms of are we getting more retention on an app? Are we getting more acquisition on, if it's an app or whatever form of, if it's an application, whatever it is you're using digitally, as well as business metrics as well. So you will see, I think, when they work synergistically, that impact across both. And I think it's really important to dispel that myth, and also increase communication across business and product stakeholders.
Thank you. Brad, I'm going to ask you this mindset of feature factory versus really focusing on the user and doing the user research. How does the program foster that?
Well, Raylan, I could say your course is one example. I'm very pleased here as I sit and hear about all the value of the research and the design aspect. But in reality, I think that is in many ways the answer. And I've taken recently to describing the single most important, or if I had to summarize the program into a single statement, I'd say we teach and we produce product managers who solve the right problem first. It's more about finding and solving the right problem than it is about solving the wrong problem the right way. And I think that's exactly what we mean when we talk about product-led is versus feature factory is you can solve a million problems, but if they're not the right one, what's the value? It really all comes back to that in asking why. And it's funny. It's why I describe the design aspect as the secret sauce in a sense, because you can learn business fundamentals all day. You can come in. We have students that enter already and they have MBAs. You can be the best technical wizard that any company has ever seen, but it's combining those things. It's as Pranita indicated, finding that balance and that spot on the spectrum where you're concerned with your executive stakeholders, but also your users. And finding that spot in between is really what the three of our guests are speaking about today, if you combine them.
And to touch upon what Brad is saying, right? The marriage between business and tech and design or user experience it's not easy to achieve. The kind of skills that you require for these are like radically different, right? When you are talking to engineers, you need to have your logical hat on to break down a problem into digestible steps for them. When you're talking to business, you need to know how to translate a product into GMV and sales, and the bottom line. And when you're talking with your UX designers, you need to be able to have empathy for the different customer segments that you're catering to. It's a super difficult skill set to master. And the reason it's important for a company is also because product management is a very leveraged position, right? Any change that a product manager, puts through, helps get to the real world is going to have an outsized impact because of the scale, right? So when you're opening up a retail store or a service retail outlet, that scale it's very local to the area, like geographically limited. But with product management, you're exposing a feature or a product to all your customers. So it's super leveraged, and it requires the product manager to interface with the directors of business, the directors of operations, directors of technology. So as a senior product manager right now, I am talking to senior directors and vice presidents from the different organizations. So it's super leveraged. And well, we should, of course, look at look at failures as not failures, but as learnings. But if we succeed in doing the right thing, it can have an outsized impact in a relatively short period of time. So I think it's important to acknowledge that it's a difficult job and it requires support from leadership.
As we were talking about your roles and how companies, retail and service companies can recruit people, you all get very excited about one thing, an advantage that retailers and servicers have over big tech. And a lot of that, you've mentioned these words a little bit, talking to the users, going into the store. A lot of it, you got very excited talking about field work. So maybe talk about how retailers can communicate that when they are recruiting people, communicating what are the advantages of working at a retailer versus a big tech company.
Yeah, so actually my first week, both at the internship at the Home Depot, as well as my first day as like a full-time individual, I was working in the store in my local store. And in this case, it happened to be because I was based out of Atlanta. It happened to be the store where we often piloted some of our technology, whether it was related to like the actual store itself, or if it was something related to the in-store app as well. And so I think the opportunity to talk to customers on the floor at different times of the day builds such a large component of customer empathy, especially in a space where maybe I myself am not always a regular customer. I think it allows you to place yourself more within the customer journey, which means when you go back to your desk as a product manager, it keeps that empathy for the customer always in your mind. Because you think back to that, oh, I remember when I had to help this pro at 9 a.m. find cement. And I really didn't know what to do. And neither did this pro. So you're thinking about like, what are the kinds of tools we have on the website? How can we recognize what your need might be? How can we surface information we have? How can we get you the right product at the right place at the right time? So I think it is such a large part, like having that physical presence and understanding how digital touch points can be interspersed within that experience is really interesting and very pervasive in a lot more industries than we think. So I think just having that exposure, it's really translatable as well. It's a great skill set to develop. And I think it's important to communicate that in the recruiting front as well.
maybe I can, address like the elephant in the room. The biggest deterrent for smart, talented product managers joining, retail and services is compensation. And the tech companies, they just pay quite a lot. There are a lot of components to their total compensation, right? They give base salary plus annual bonus plus sign-on bonus plus restricted stock options, stock units, sometimes stock options. So there is that compensation factor, which is driving the motivation of a lot of candidates. On the flip side, the advantages that retail and services has is like Pranita mentioned, right? You are talking to the customer. Like it's a customer-facing product. What you're selling is something that we use in our day-to-day lives, right? We, as humans, like we as customers, use the products of retail and services. So it's very tangible, and that is super exciting for me to tell my set of circle that I work at Walmart. Like they get it. Whereas if some of my network, they work within the cloud services and like the cloud industry, right? They're working within like a small part of like this huge juggernaut, but I don't get it, right? Like we cannot talk about it socially, so it's not super exciting, right? It's sometimes your customer is a developer, which is also still great, but sometimes your customer is a bot, and that's interesting for some people. But I think the way to think about this is there are pre-qualified candidates within your organizations that, if trained properly, if they get the opportunity to upskill themselves, they can do excellent jobs as product managers. And I'm like a living example of that. I've worked in the fashion and retail industry as an operations manager and as a category manager. And then I came to this program to upskill and then move into product management. So I think there are super motivated individuals who need help with upskilling themselves, who need investment from these large organizations to upskill and then like contribute in this highly leveraged position.
Thank you. Neha, you're in a different type of industry. Do you want to comment on this?
For me, it's different. It's everything that Pranita and Daksh said, customer-centric, where you are, and compensation. So when I think of a tech company, the first thing that comes to my mind is then companies are almost at that state-of-art level in their product journey. So when I enter a product, let's say I join one of the tech giants, before going in, there are very less things I can see where I can make that impact. And then coming back to the tangible impact that I can actually feel, retail offers me that option. And I worked with retail with my Dick's Sporting Goods experience. Now I am in healthcare, which is very different. And my customers are internal customers. My customers are not the outside world as well. The kind of work I am doing is I'm empathizing with my customer, which are internal customers, building them their tools, building them many softwares, building them what they need. So it's all still empathetic. I still don't see the direct impact, but it's tangible in the way that I know that even if I can make healthcare affordable for one more person, if I can help lower the insurance premium for somebody, that's my impact. So I think that's the biggest reason for me, specifically talking about healthcare, that I see that biggest impact that I can make, even if it's one person. I don't want to be in a role where I roll out a feature and that helps hundreds of people. But if I can really make healthcare accessible to one person, lower their insurance rate or do whatever, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And then there's more to do here in retail and services industry. They are not at that place where they have the state-of-art technology. They are somewhere in their early stages of being product-led and so-called, whether we call it customer-centric, whether we say is their app or their product state-of-the-art the customers interact with. So it's all of those things. There's more to do. There's tangible impact. There's more empathy for customer. And at the end, it's about what you want. So big tech, even if it pays me more, it's where I want to be in my journey, what kind of impact I want to make. And of course, you do not know until you are in a particular role for a few months or maybe up till a year that you really want to be here, or do you want to move on? Because with product, there are many, many, many options for you to move on. So I think for me, it's majorly that impact, the customer empathy, which I can really do talking to my customers every day, seeing them use products, and then realizing what needs to be done versus what Daksh gave an example about. Somebody working for cloud services, they don't have any interaction with the customer. A bot can't tell me what is to be built.
So part of what
one
I'm
other
hearing
point
is-
also, sorry, really quick to interject. I think something that I've definitely really appreciated about being like both in the retail and services space, especially during the pandemic, is it's taught me a lot about what's happening in the world, examples of like logistics, supply chain operations, just the in-depth experience that I've gotten in those spaces, even if I'm just sitting adjacent as a product partner to the stakeholders. I think deepening that experience in that skill set is not something that, again, for example, like cloud services or something that is not as tangible, is not going to have the same types of challenges, but a large amount of our global market still operates in physical goods, right? And you need the supply chain and the ops and the logistics to drive those things. And it's hands-on experience that you can get. I think I'm still in my early to mid career point, and to have that kind of hands-on experience so early on is something that I think like retailers and service industry like leadership should really, I think, communicate through recruiting as well.
Thank you. So I'm hearing that it's, compensation aside, there are some things that are important to people, both of those being personal challenges, which retail and service companies can offer because of the complexity, in my experience working in retail companies as well, just that depth of complexity of delivering a product through multiple channels and it being physically delivered in a physical space is just rewarding from a personal point of view. But also the topic or what you're delivering, being able to work in a healthcare space, or, even being able to work in home services, or bringing products to people in an affordable manner, like at Walmart. So retail companies, service companies can highlight those missions or the things that they do that they can offer as a way of finding fulfillment as a product manager, because it's not always about compensation. When you are communicating, just kind of put you're looking for a job hat back on, what are the best ways that companies can communicate those things then? What did you look for when you were looking in for a job and for the things that meet your needs?
Yeah, I think Nehal, and I think Daksh also touched on this point about like just referencing job descriptions from earlier. I think job descriptions are a good starting point to get a good idea, but I really think the most effective interactions I've had are like the face-to-face or the video type interactions. So whether that's like in-person recruiting, whether that's at conferences, so like having more of a presence like within the product conference circuit. I think some of those conversations, understanding, I think it's a good idea for myself, and I'm sure as many other product managers, to chat with whether it's like, the leadership, hiring manager, to understand what the team's like challenges are, what the customer challenges are, and what the team dynamic is like. Because I think those conversations are what drive that comfort level and that interest of whether like I would fit into this team as we move also into a more like remote type world. Like I know right now I actually work in 100% remote world. So since I've started my role, I've not met any of my coworkers, which is I think a very interesting transition from like what we would have imagined a few years ago as well. So I think just being there and communicating a lot of the things we chatted about today face to face is in my opinion the best way to do that.
If you were to break down like the recruiting process into two steps, the first is sourcing and the second one is actually engaging the candidate. For the first step, companies and hiring managers need to be on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Reddit. Put it out there that you're hiring. Put it out there that these are the skills I'm looking for. These are the experiences I'm looking for, and then let these large network platforms do their magic, right? There will be inbound request, inbound interest. So just instead of going through, your workday job descriptions and then going through all kinds of the old recruiting channels, the hiring manager can today actually put their requirements on these 3 platforms. Why these 3 specifically? Well, because all prospective product managers and all existing product managers who want to grow up in their career are on these platforms. And the second one is once you have that inbound, right? How do you engage? I think Pranita said it best. Just being willing to hop on that video call as a non-interview. 15-minute chat. Just want to get to know the candidate. Want to share the experience, being more human, and it being a non-evaluative chat. I think that is something that well, personally also I took my current job because my director hopped on a call for 15 minutes during her lunch break and said that she just wanted to get to know me. So I think that's your secret, kicker.
I think Daksh raised a very valid point that when we see job descriptions on LinkedIn or various other platforms, we do not know who's hiring, what kind of work they do. When I see a job description, first of all, as candidates, we just apply blankly. We are looking for internships. We are looking for roles. If it's our first role out of grad school, we're like, let's get something. Sometimes we may have restrictions, but if not, we will just apply to anything. So job descriptions just give you so much, but some job descriptions do have a person's name, a person's email. Those are very helpful because for me as a candidate, I would just connect with them on LinkedIn or somehow reach to them on an email and say, I want to learn more about the company. And as a candidate, what I personally do is also look up other people in product in that company. So not just this particular hiring manager or HR, because HRs honestly do not know much. They don't know about the role. They don't know what you are doing. So unless and until I reach out to the director or my manager or whoever works in my product team or a similar role, I wouldn't know. But even other people would help me. So I would reach out to other people. So maybe that open coffee chat kind of a thing that, okay, let's just talk. This is sort of office hours or whatever it could be. But those conversations are very helpful for any person who's applying to, because at the end, it's a workday application. You would spend 30 minutes to an hour. You will just apply. Once you are sort of mid-career, of course, you will not apply to 100 applications. You will apply to only some that really make sense to you, but still JDs don't do a good job. Or it's only the interviews or these conversations that help at the end.
Thank you. Brad, what are some of the techniques you see companies?
Well, I think the big hitter here is every response that was positive had autonomy as part of the job description or part of the expectation. It had the expectation that decisions are product-based. Decisions are not the whim of a CFO or someone in an office that you might pass in the hallway and then never see again. So like as everyone's talking about what they love about their job, I'm actually sitting here thinking about the examples of people that I know started a job and 2 months later they're looking to move somewhere else, or those scenarios, which most certainly do happen, and they happen in some of the examples were discussed where you might have a very glamorous employer title or name, but you're really doing a routine role day in and day out. I don't hear any of that in our 3 guests today. In fact, I know that, I know some of their work, and I know that that's exactly the type of thing that draws our students. And we didn't talk so much about retention, and I think that's what leads to the retention, is the idea that you do have autonomy, you have the authority and at least opportunity to influence high impact decisions and not just do as you're told, which because the PM title can be nebulous, Some PMs are just there doing whatever their manager tells them, whatever the CTO tells them, whatever it may be. I don't hear that really at all today, but it happens for sure. And maybe it leads, if I may, Raylan, it leads to maybe the obvious question, the one that we haven't sort of crossed the bridge yet, is with the grads that we have online today, I'm curious what your employer can put in front of you related to, even at the initial introduction, related to how this role may provide you with a longer term, the retention aspect, a longer term journey, or fit into, even if you only intend to stay there 3 years. And I've heard people tell product managers, do not stay here longer than 3 years. But so 3 years is kind of like dog years. It's maybe you want to stay there 30. And how do you make that decision? What appeals to you? And what's an honest way to have that conversation with your manager, your director?
Yeah, I think like one part of it that I would definitely say is defining like how to be successful in your role upfront. So I think this can happen as early as the first week, right? And you hear a lot of chatter, whether it's like on LinkedIn or like other professional networks, around the 30, 60, 90-day plans of how to be successful. But I think it's really important to define what success looks like at your current role. So break it down in terms of like, what aspect of my role, what's the split of like my tactical versus my strategic focus in this role? What are the different skill sets I should be, where should I be at these certain different skill sets? Whether it's like, examples like having more customer empathy, having your analytical skills, thinking about prioritization. So really being very clear on what success looks like with each of those different categories, and having a two-way conversation with your hiring manager. In both of my roles, like in the past 3 years, I've been able to have those conversations. And I think that's what drove me to feel really fulfilled and feel like I understood what I was doing in my role, and I had a clear path forward. And as a part of that conversation, I think it's also important to be honest around whether you're looking to grow in the current role, so like build out your skill sets and kind of get better at doing what you're doing, or additionally also how to get to like the next levels. So are you interested in kind of the next, what's like next after this role? How do you expand scope? And then bridging that gap, like, is it that you take on a couple side projects? Is it that you shadow like another PM or another team? And I think having these conversations iteratively, like with your hiring manager or other PM folks like on your teams or other teams, I think has been really helpful for me, and something that I kind of look forward to as like the golden standard now with my employer. And I think the last point on that too is something more industry related, but I think one thing that services and retail companies should try to emulate from big tech companies is titles and the hierarchy of like how product management does work. Because that over time, that tends to be something that gets standardized across the industry. So, if you are interested in staying in retail and services for some time, but transitioning into big tech or vice versa, attracting talent from big tech, I think having standardization around like, what is the tiering structure for PM? Making sure that aligns to whether it's, like FANG companies or like other types of companies is helpful too.
For me, it's many things. Like if I think of my current company, HighMark, what HighMark did and versus things that they could have done better. How long have my colleagues stayed there for is a big part to tell me whether this company might be a good fit for me. So one of the questions that I always ask to any company is, how does the work-life balance look like? And I'm somebody who has 2 kids, so I really care about my family time. I do not want to work. If I shut down my laptop at 5, it's done. I don't want to be working late nights. So that is, I think, the biggest piece. Of course, you only know that once you talk to the people there, then only you can know whether people have stayed there for, it's like a high turnover kind of a company, or is it a place where people stay. That means if people have stayed, the culture is nice, right? And then the other aspect that Pranita touched upon is what kind of a product culture do they have? Is it like a top-down approach? Somebody follows the orders from top, or is it actually the authority aspect of it that Brad talked about? That will you get that authority? So when I was interviewing for HighMark, my manager, it was a very casual conversation. It was still an interview, but my manager was very clear to tell me and communicate what would success be like. She very clearly told me, this is our goal. You are working for internal customers. So knowing that I'm going and applying for a role which is internal versus external customers matters a lot, because when I think of external customers, those changes sometimes, those features you develop or whatever you make for external customers is sometimes much more gives you that adrenaline rush much more sometimes than working for internal customers, where the change might be slow. You don't see a direct impact. It's sort of multi-stepped approach. So internal versus external customers. And then at the same time, benefits, everybody does talk about it. For me, it was important that the company has some kind of maternity leave policy. So benefits do count, but I'm guessing that most companies have similar benefits. And of course, if you have specific things in mind, you would talk to your manager about it. Then what's the structure of the product team, the work-life balance, and really basically, how are the people there? So it's all of those things for me at HighMark that still work. And those were the things I wanted to know. Maybe these were questions I asked. Maybe these were questions they told me themselves. They answered for me.
Thank you. So we're getting close to the end of the hour, but we can stay and we can take another, 15 minutes, half an hour for question and answer. But I do want to go ahead and do a soft close for people who can't stay past the hour. And then we'll open it for Q&A. So if you have some question and answer, you can go ahead and enter it in the Q&A panel that's accessible in your Zoom banner. And we'll get to that. And just let me do a little bit of wrap up for people who may need to leave. So this was a great conversation today. If you think this applies to your company, you really are invited to reach out and explore some opportunities further, particularly with our Masters of Product Management program, whether that's you're considering a career as a product manager or you're a leader in your organization looking to hire talent, we can definitely speak to you further. So feel free to reach out to Brad Iben. His email address is up on the screen. His email is beiben@andrew.cmu.edu, or you could also visit the MSPM program website at ms.product/management.cmu.edu. ENAiBLE will be taking a break for the months of June and July, and we'll be resuming our programming in August. So look in July for an announcement for what our August meeting will be. And as always, we would like to hear from you. Any areas of future discussions that you would like to see, areas of concern, you can always write us or email us at our email address, which is also in the lower right corner of the screen, which is enable@cmu.edu. And finally, we would like to encourage you to be a sponsor. And it's a really good way to participate deeply in our community, opportunities to engage with our faculty behind the scenes, behind these types of webinars. So if you're interested in that, you can contact Chris Kissel at ENAiBLE. And the information is on the screen here. So we are going to go ahead and move into Q&A. If you want to put Q&A in the Q&A panel. And Brad, did you want to jump in and say something?
I just wanted to add one more note, is that especially for our audience today, we do corporate sponsored projects in the fall semester. So in addition to prospective students and employers, you can reach out to me to discuss the prospect of having a team of product management master students take on a real world project for your organization. And like some of the companies that have been named earlier today have already done that. We've had some pretty deep relationships with companies like Home Depot That's available, and we're doing that right now. Normally, I would say you could also hire interns for the summer, but they're all taken. So have to get in line for next year.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. So I did see one question pop up. So I'll go ahead and put that out there that we can kind of go around and we can answer that. But that one is about finding and nurturing talent from within the organization. You guys work with people, you work with different people in the organization. I know this is something that we had mentioned a little bit, but is that also an opportunity for retail and service companies? And how might you suggest that they go about doing that?
So
I can
from
take-
my, go ahead.
Thanks, Neil. I can take a quick crack. Identify the high performers in different business functions, operations, category, design, tech. Identify like who's motivated to become, who's motivated to learn more beyond their current business function. Help them skill up. Reach out to Brad, see how that person can engage with Carnegie Mellon. Reach out to us. Help them get connected to the right mentors, and give them the opportunity to take on a small project, which leads to product management. Yeah, I think so. Step one, identify who's interested and who's talented. Step two, give them the skills and the support and the sponsorship that they need to take on a project.
Darsh, can I add to that briefly? And thank you for the lead in, because I think it was a good and correct response. There are two ways as it relates to the MSPM program or to working with CMU specifically. And one of them, I think, really hits at the heart of these young, talented people who need a pathway. One is a lot of companies have faded away from the idea of sponsoring educational reimbursement. And if you were to find a truly high performer and decide maybe the MSPM program is for them, and you wanted to sponsor that person in exchange for some commitment afterwards, you're really only giving them up for 2 separate 4-month periods, because you have access to them during the internship period and immediately afterwards. It's a big investment, to be sure, but how important is PM in your organization? And how important is keeping those top performers in your organization? And secondly, a lower investment pathway that we're working on is more of an executive education kind of externship program, where we have within this office, not part of the MSPM program necessarily, but we have drafted kind of a syllabus that would be like a 6-month apprenticeship program that we're sort of testing out. It's extremely new. It's still what you might call in beta phase. But if anybody might be interested in saying, we want to identify multiple people within our organization as a class and put them through this sort of, consider it like an APM level program, reach out, please, because we have some ideas on that.
Can I also add one pointer to it? I do not know if that is an option or not, but even some specific courses, sometimes you may identify that a particular person is a high performer and you have identified this person. I don't know if there's a way, but my guess is there would be a way to do some courses with CMU, not really, even if it's not a 2-4 month kind of a program, but something where even if you get people started on something, then you can really evaluate whether it's worth to get a deep dive and sponsor their degree or whatever. As an employer, if I think, I do not know if I right away want to do that, but Brad could answer that better. But for me, there were some courses that really stood out for my curriculum. So if I were to do those courses and my company was sponsoring it, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, Nehal, I think regardless of what your starting point and your desired endpoint are, CMU has an entire portfolio of product programs, and it doesn't necessarily need to be an MSPM or an MBA or an MHCI even. Their paths. It's worth a conversation.
Thank you, Brad. Well, that was really our only Q&A question, and we've lost a couple of our panelists with the timing. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. I want to thank everyone for coming, and definitely thank our speakers again. I want to thank Pranita, Daksh, Neha, and Brad for your time today and for this conversation. And I want to help everyone that helped put on this event. Brian Yeski, Laura Alford, Chris Kissel, and for sure our sponsors of ENAiBLE, who are Progressive and Zendesk. With all of that, we're going to officially say goodbye to you today. Goodbye and thank you.